Today's video is going to be a little bit different. I recently installed an ARB twin air compressor on my truck, and when I did that, my plan was to make a video walking through the entire process of how I did it, so you could hopefully recreate that on your F250 or F350 Super Duty. I realized as I started making that video that I wasn't quite knowledgeable enough to be giving advice on how to do it and wire gauge and all the electronic stuff. I just wasn't quite there. And I didn't want to give the wrong information to people online and then follow that and it just be wrong. So instead, I worked through the install myself, hit a couple of snags along the way, but eventually got it done, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. As you can tell, I keep pointing over here. That's because I installed it into this Lightner gear pod on the rack on my truck. And that is for a few reasons that I'll get into in a minute. But first, I just wanted to talk about the whole reason I'm doing this video to begin with. When I went to install this air compressor on my truck, I was looking high and low for any kind of inspiration I could find. Well, it turns out that there isn't a lot of that information on the internet. I found a couple of posts on a few forums, maybe one or two YouTube videos, 2 or 3 pages past all the Toyotas and the Jeeps, but it was far and few between. I do want to say the point of this video is not a walkthrough step-by-step guide on how to install an ARB compressor. Again, I don't think I'm qualified to give those instructions out. This is more so just an inspirational type video to hopefully give you some ideas for your rig. With that being said, before I get into why I installed it on the rack instead of anywhere else, I first want to talk about why I didn't install it under the hood. Let's go over there. Now, for context, this is a 2020 F350 Super Duty with the 6.7 liter diesel engine in it and the Tremor off-road package. Why does that matter? Well, mostly because if you've never seen under the hood of a diesel truck before, you wouldn't know that it is packed under here. There is essentially zero room to add anything other than some accessory wires. This truck has dual batteries, dual alternators, the engine is massive, it has the upfitter switches sub-panel in there over by the fuse box. It is tight. Most people install their compressors here. It's a great spot, it's easy to access, you can pop the hood, whatever you need it's right there. When I was planning this project, I already knew there was going to be no available space under here, so I started looking for alternatives online, and like I said, there's not a lot of information on this. I did, however, find a really detailed post online on how somebody had installed it under the spare tire on the rear of the truck. And when I saw that thread, I initially thought, well, problem solved. I can just install it under the spare tire carrier, it'll be great right there, won't get hit by rocks, very well protected by the spare, no problem, let's do it. And then I kind of thought about it a little bit, and my truck sees a lot of snow, it sees a lot of ice, it sees some water crossings, and the worst thing that my truck sees is road salt. Now, if you're not from the northern part of the US or anywhere that sees snow, you wouldn't know how quickly road salt can rust things. Because of the lack of information about something like that, I didn't feel comfortable going through with putting it under the spare tire carrier. My main concern was really that it would rust out and I would have to replace it much sooner than I wanted to. These things are not cheap and I want it to last as long as possible. So that was out. Okay, well, I drive a Super Duty. My bed's huge. Why not just mount it to the side of the bed, call it a day? As you can see, the bed of my truck is pretty busy. I have a deck drawer system. We have a Dometic 75 dual zone fridge in here on a fridge slide. The gear pods on either side take up a lot of interior space, and I already fill this with things. So that wasn't really an option either. I like the fact that I can slide stuff in and out of my truck, and I still have a little bit of cargo space if I ever need to haul a piece of plywood. I can just take the fridge out and put the plywood in and it fits no problem. So now we can't put it under the hood, we can't put it under the spare tire carrier, and it's not going to fit in the bed. Now what do I do? And at that point, the air compressor kind of sat in the corner collecting dust for a couple of weeks while I figured out where I wanted to put this. I was chomping at the bit to get this thing installed because it's seriously one of the biggest quality of life improvements you can make to an overlanding or off-roading rig. The ability to air up and down whenever and wherever you need to is really important. So I wanted to be able to get this done. And that is where the gear pod comes in. This was, to me, the only solution that really worked on my rig. I didn't love sacrificing a gear pod to make it happen, especially considering they aren't cheap, but this one was already kind of sitting unused on the rig as it was. I had a couple of things in here, you know, a couple of straps, some tie downs. I have a saw in there, like nothing important. that number one, can't be moved, and number two, takes up a lot of space to begin with. So that's what I did. I drilled holes in the back of the gear pod, and the air compressor actually comes with a drilling template. So the compressor is actually mounted directly to the rear of the gear pod itself. At first, I was a little bit skeptical of the structural rigidity of this gear pod because it is, I mean, it's, at the end of the day, it's plastic. Like it's, you know, it's good plastic, it's high quality plastic, but it is plastic and that thing is heavy. So I decided that if it was moving around or, you know, the plastic started bowing after I installed it or a couple of days later, that I would take it out, reinforce it with a metal backing plate and then reinstall it again just to help it. It's been, man, I want to say 3 weeks and that hasn't been a problem so far. I've taken it on, I think three trails, used it a total of like 5 times. And the back of the gear pod is still nice and strong. It's not wobbly at all. We've had no problems in that regard. Okay, so that's out of the way. It's in the gear pod and installed. Now we need to wire it. How are we gonna do that? This is a really long wiring run from the gear pod all the way to the front of the truck. And the wiring loom that comes with the compressor is not even close to long enough. Like I said at the beginning of the video, my electrical knowledge is average at best. And so I wasn't really comfortable going into this with extending the loom. But I did a lot of research online, looked at a bunch of numbers that I did not understand, and also confirmed with my brother-in-law, who just so happens to be an engineer, that what I was doing made sense and wasn't going to cause a fire, which he confirmed was fine. Okay, so I got rid of some stuff, moved some stuff out of the way so that we can get a better idea of what this looks like and how the wiring is laid out for the compressor. So at the bottom below the air compressor itself, you can see that there are a couple of cables here. These are just to connect the actual air compressor units to the electrical system itself. So those come installed just like that. That's no big deal. The smaller loom that you can see right here is actually for wiring up air lockers and to wire it to a switch so that you can actually turn the air compressor on and off. And right here, you can't see it super well, but this is actually the harness for the main power to the battery from the air compressor. What I ended up doing was cutting a hole at the bottom of the gear pod as well. You can't see it super well, but there is a hole in the bottom of the gear pod right there to run that wiring harness through. There was no way that I was gonna let it like flap out in front. That just wasn't gonna happen. So that was just kind of a sacrifice that had to be made, but it didn't really matter because I had already drilled 4 other holes for the compressor itself. Coming around inside of the bed, this is one of the 4 corners of my deck system, and this normally sits right on there like that, but this is just a pass through to the bed. This is where I joined the air compressor main wiring harness from the bottom of the gear pod, as well as that smaller wire is a switch wire. And I ran that down the side of the deck system into that compartment. The compressor harness actually comes with 2 40 amp fused wires coming directly out of the main harness. And what I did was just join them here at the little connection that you can see, and then run that to an 8 gauge wire that goes under the truck. Did the same thing for the negative side of the circuit. You just can't quite see it. It's a little further back there, but it is there, believe me. And then the excess wire I just left down here. I don't know, I might change exactly how I do this wire run in the future, which would require a little bit of a longer run. So I just kept it there for now. It's not hurting anything, but again, it is pretty messy. And then to exit the bed of the truck, 4 beds come with a couple of grommets in the front of them. Pretty sure most trucks come with them, but I just opened that grommet up and ran the wires through the grommet between the bed of the truck and the cab. So yeah, that harness actually comes out right here, right in the bottom of the bed, and then it runs below. You can see right here where the wiring harness comes through, and then I just ran it along the frame rail all the way to the front where my batteries are, and just zip tied it along with the other wiring harness that I have on this frame rail. I just ran it all the way along and zip tied it to that harness so it stayed nice and tight. That wire then meets up here under the hood, and this is an 80 amp fuse that I installed. This is a resettable fuse just in case, but I fused it right here as close to it as I could to the battery. I know there are already 2 40 amp fuses that I did not want to cut out just because it's just better safe than sorry, but I did want to reinforce it with a fuse much, much closer to the battery. So that's why this 80 amp fuse is here. Why is it 80 amps? Because each of the other wires are fused at 40 and I combine them into one 8 gauge larger wire. And then I just zip tied that as tightly as I could, ran that to my positive right here, and that was done. If you're curious about what this random fused wire is that I also have going onto my battery, that is for an EcoFlow alternator charger. So that wiring loom was longer, but still a very close run. You can see it's not super clean, but that's what that is. Now for the negative side of the circuit, there's actually a grounding lug just beside my spare tire carrier from the factory. So all I did was wire my negative over to that, and that was done as well. So that was really, really quick. Okay, so now our circuit is done. The compressor is officially wired, but we need a way to turn it on. So like I showed you earlier, the compressor comes with a second harness that is for air lockers and for wiring it to a switch. It also comes with an ARB switch. Now, I could have totally installed that, but number one, I would have had to make room for it in the truck, and number two, I already have upfitter switches. So I just had to figure out which one of the wires in the like 3 or 4 wires in that harness was the actual activation wire so that I could pull that from it and run that up to my upfitter switches below the hood. The one thing that I think you can take from this video is that if you are looking to use your own switch on one of these compressors, make sure that you pull the purple wire from the harness. That is the one that you can wire up to any switch that you want, and it will turn the compressor on when you flip it. So for me, my upfitter switches are right here in front of the little sunglass holder. You can wire the compressor to any of these. The last two, from my understanding, you're able to activate when the truck is off as long as you move a fuse, but you don't want to use this air compressor when the truck is off. It will drain your battery and you'll be stuck on the side of the road. So I just used aux switch number 1. I wired that up to the upfitter panel under the hood of the truck. And when I flip the switch when the truck is on, it will turn the air compressor on. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn the truck on and then flip the switch on, and we will go around to the other side and watch it turn on. I can now go ahead, hook up my air hose to it. I installed a chuck that came with the air up kit that ARB makes. I just wanted something really simple for now. I might down the road end up using airlines and taking this to a couple of other points on the truck so that I can access it wherever I want to, and I can just actually leave this closed. The nice thing about that is that since there is a pretty big hole in the bottom of the gear pod, there is enough airflow that I can close this and the compressor will still run. So that is something that I'm thinking about doing. I don't know if it's worth it quite yet, but it'll likely end up happening. All right, guys, well, that's pretty much it. There's not much more to it than that. You know, it seems a lot more complicated before you actually end up installing these. And it's a really daunting task, especially if you don't have a lot of experience working with electrical systems. But at the end of the day, I'm super happy with how this turned out. It works really, really well. Only takes a few seconds to get it going from stopping the truck to airing back up. And I can air all 4 of my tires up from like 18 to 20 PSI all the way to 60 in a couple of minutes without stopping. That is the best thing about this, is that I can keep this running and air up all 4 of my tires to 60 PSI without stopping. One tire to the next, no brakes, it keeps going without a problem. Again, I know this was very different to my normal content. I'm usually making videos about camping, overlanding, and they're all, you know, well produced in 3 cameras and all that stuff. But I thought this was really good information to have, and information that I wish I had had when I did this myself. So if you guys are interested in content like this in the future, as well as any camping content, overlanding content, stuff like that, please subscribe to the channel and please like the video if it helped you, because that helps me. Until next time, thanks for watching, and we'll see you down the trail.